The full story of Kundalini hidden in African empires. Every spiritualist must know this. Kundalini, the forgotten breath of divinity within the human form. As told by a veteran archaeologist, ancient symbolist, sacred linguist, and mythical storyteller, who speaks not to convince, but to awaken what was always known. They told you it was only a metaphor, but metaphors do not breathe, and this one, hidden beneath your spine, has been exhaling quietly for lifetimes. No one told you the truth. No one warned you that your body was a temple, built not by masons, but by memory, with an inner altar no priest ever dared name, and a chamber locked not by iron, but by amnesia. The moment your skin met sunlight for the first time, while the umbilical cord still pulsed with life, another cord, older than Egypt, older than Kush, coiled itself at the base of your spine, not in flesh, but in fire, not in thought, but in memory. It didn't move, it didn't speak, it simply waited, like a sleeping serpent beneath the spine of every empire, from Ife to Nubia, from the Dogon altars to the maps of the stars, waiting for you to remember. They called it myth to keep you from asking. They called it dangerous to keep you obedient. They buried it beneath poems, beneath psalms, beneath lies called history. But it was never lost, just forgotten. Kundalini, the coiled one, the breath of divinity, not above, not below, but within. It is not belief, it is not religion, it is the current of becoming, the sacred fire winding through your spine, through every civilization that dared to turn inward, and through every soul that ever whispered, there must be more than this. This is where the true story begins, not outside you, not in books, but in the bones that remember the stars, and the serpent that dreams beneath them. The forgotten blueprint. There is a blueprint that no hand ever drew, because it was never meant to be written. It was inscribed inside you, long before ink, before alphabets, before language itself cracked open from silence. Not on tablets, not in scrolls, not even whispered into the ears of prophets, but carved in the marrow of your bones, hidden in the rhythm of your breath, embedded in the geometry of your dreams, the ones that speak without words, in the tongue of symbols, fire, and forgotten stars. You carry it, not like knowledge, but like memory. But this map was never local. Long before borders carved the world, this language spoke from every temple, every stone, every breath. In Egypt, she curled as a serpent upon the brow of kings. In Greece, she danced through the caduceus of Hermes, winding upward like memory rising. In China, she shimmered as Qi, moving through invisible rivers of the body. In the Maya temples, she appeared in visions, a serpent between worlds. They never called her by the same name, but every myth was echoing the same force. Kundalini, the flame that waits to rise. Long before borders, long before dogma, there were those who remembered. The ancient yogis of India mapped it as Kundalini, a sacred current coiled at the base of the spine, not as metaphor, but as biological divinity waiting to awaken. The Egyptian priest kings wore it as Uraeus, the serpent rising from the brow, the sign of vision that pierces veils. Not decoration, activation. The Greeks, through Hermes Trismegistus, twisted it into the caduceus, two serpents spiraling around a central staff. Not medicine, but metamorphosis. All of them, All these civilizations, separated by oceans, by empires, by centuries, spoke the same silent truth. They saw the same serpent. They felt the same fire. They walked the same inner staircase of energy rising through the spine. You thought it was just myth? No, it was a map, but not for places. A map for becoming. A sacred cartography woven into the body itself. A design so precise, it could only have come from something older than language. The chakras are not symbols. They are living gates. Wheels of energy spinning like suns at key intersections of flesh and frequency. And the serpent, Kundalini, is the key. Not a fantasy, a forgotten function. You don't believe in it? That's fine. It believes in you. It's been dreaming of you remembering since the first time you forgot. What the ancients knew was never mystical. It was experiential science. It was sacred engineering. Not to escape the body, but to ignite it. Not to ascend away from Earth, but to turn the body into a pillar of light that bridges Earth and sky. And this is the blueprint they left behind. Not written in ink, but in bone, in breath, in the spiral of your own spine. And now that you're hearing these words, the map is no longer silent. It stirs, it remembers, and it begins to glow. The stolen flame. But that fire, that luminous thread coiled in the root of your being, was stolen. Not extinguished, not destroyed, but hidden. By hands cloaked in empire, by voices trembling behind thrones, by institutions built not on truth, but on the fear of what happens when a single soul remembers. Because when a human remembers that within them burns the fire of gods, dogma collapses, obedience crumbles. No one can sell you salvation when you realize you've carried the divine sparks since before your first breath. So they rewrote the symbols. They took the serpent, once a sacred guide, the guardian of gateways, and turned it into a villain, a tempter, a mask for evil. In the old temples, the serpent was carved into stone as a sign of inner ascension. In the new books, it was turned into the fall of man. They severed the body from the spirit, cut the spine from the soul, labeled sensation as sin, and painted intuition as insanity. And they did not need weapons. They only needed stories. Stories that replaced mystery with fear, power with shame, and the sacred feminine current with silence. Every flame that rose from the base of the spine, every pulse of awakening, every whisper of inner light was doused, not with water, but with doctrine, with ridicule, with 1,000 subtle ways of saying, "Do not look within, there is nothing there for you." But they lied, not maliciously, but out of terror. Because the awakened human is ungovernable, and systems built on submission cannot survive the sovereignty of the soul. Kundalini was never lost, it was silenced, not with chains, but with forgetting. And forgetting is the most powerful prison ever built. It doesn't need guards, it doesn't need walls, it only needs a mirror you're too afraid to look into. But a thing forgotten is not a thing gone. The flame still flickers in the bones, the serpent still dreams beneath the roots of your spine, and the symbols they tried to bury still rise in your breath, your blood, your sleep. You don't need to find it. You only need to stop denying that it's always been there. This flame isn't waiting for permission. It's waiting for readiness. breath that remembers. Some things cannot be erased. Not by conquest, not by dogma, not even by centuries of forgetting. Breath is one of them. Before you spoke, before you were named, before the world wrapped its rules around your skin, you were already breathing, and your breath was already remembering. Because breath is not just air, it is rhythm, it is pulse, it is the oldest prayer spoken by the body, echoing the rise and fall of oceans, the expansion and contraction of galaxies, the inhale and exhale of stars being born. Every time you breathe deeply, not the shallow breath of survival, but the breath that trembles the ribs, you enter the temple again. You knock on the hidden door again. You whisper to the serpent, "I haven't forgotten." And it listens, not with ears, but with vibration. It stirs not when you strive, but when you surrender. When you finally stop performing for the world, when the masks fall away and silence becomes your native tongue again. In that stillness, the breath becomes a bridge, not to something external, but to the deep interior sky where the divine first entered the body. You do not need to be a guru. You do not need titles, mantras, malas, or incense. You only need to be honest. Honest enough to be still. Still enough to feel what the noise has buried. Brave enough to sit with it without running. The serpent does not rise for spectacle. It does not awaken for performance. It coils tighter when you fake what you feel. It waits for authenticity. Because this force, Kundalini, is not interested in your outer posture. It moves in response to inner alignment. So when you breathe, don't just pull air, pull memory. Pull your own forgotten name from the base of your spine to the cave of your heart. Let breath be the key that unlocks the frequency of remembrance. Let each inhale say, "I am here." Let each exhale say, "I remember." Because even if you don't, your breath always has. When the serpent rises. When true Kundalini moves, it does not ask for your readiness. It does not wait for your permission. It knows when the gates within are soft enough to open. And when it does, nothing remains untouched. You don't see light, you become it. Not the gentle glow of candles, but the kind that shatters walls, pierces through veils, and burns away everything you were never meant to be. You don't ask questions. You become the answer that was buried in your marrow. The riddle is solved not in the mind, but in the ignition of being. But know this, real light is not polite. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't soothe your illusions. It is holy fire, and it consumes lies. It tears through the roles you've performed for love. It burns the costumes of survival. It drags the hidden grief from the cellar of your memory, not to punish you, but to set you free. This is not a mystical high. This is not a performance of bliss. This is resurrection. Kundalini does not elevate your ego. It demolishes it, not to leave you empty, but to reveal what was underneath all along. The unspoken self, the flame without a name, the pulse of source wrapped in a human heartbeat. It doesn't care for how spiritual you look. It's not interested in your followers, your crystals, or your mantras. It rises in response to your willingness to die to illusion. It rips the crown off false kings in your mind. It exposes where you've been hiding behind intellect, dogma, or pride. And it leads you, sometimes crawling, sometimes burning, into the cave of your soul, not to destroy you, but to reintroduce you. When you return, you will not be healed in the way the world defines it. You will be raw, vast, untamed. But you will walk with eyes that see through stone. You will speak with a tongue that remembers thunder. You will move as the current of life itself, not just a person, a presence, a force, a temple that breathes. Because when Kundalini rises, you do not become more, you become true. You were never asleep. You thought you were awake. No, you were dreaming. Not in sleep, but in survival, playing the role of a person in a world that taught you how to forget, systematically, ritualistically, and with precision. You learned how to be you by memorizing masks, by bending your soul into shapes that would be accepted, by trading your wild truth for praise, safety, and belonging. But the soul does not forget. It stores the truth in the marrow. It waits. It whispers between heartbeats. And when Kundalini stirs, when the veil begins to lift, you don't awaken like a sleeper opening their eyes. You awaken like a storm, remembering its thunder. You don't learn something new. You unlearn everything false. You don't become enlightened. You become naked of illusion, of programming, of pretense. You realize that the divine never left, that you weren't waiting on heaven, you were simply waiting on yourself. And suddenly, everything is alive. The breeze that kisses your skin, the pause between thoughts, the glance of a stranger on the street, all of it becomes sacred transmission. All of it becomes oracular. Because when the serpent rises and the fog of forgetting is burned away, you don't just see the world, you see through it. You see the geometry of feeling, the frequency of thought, the hidden language of light in every ordinary thing. A quiet inhale becomes a cosmic ceremony. A sigh becomes a hymn. Your own heartbeat becomes a drum of creation. And then it happens. You become the mirror through which the universe remembers itself. You are no longer a separate witness. You are the eye within the eye, the seer and the seen. You walk in the world, but the world now walks within you. You were never asleep. You were deep within the dream of forgetting, awaiting the moment when truth would become too loud to ignore. And now, that moment has come. The fire that remembers you. You were taught to remember history, but what if the fire remembers you? Before you took a name, before you were wrapped in skin, before you were told what to be, I was already inside you. I am not your imagination. I am not a metaphor. I am the first breath behind your lungs. I am the dream your bones keep trying to tell you. I am the fire that did not forget, even when you did. Every time you trembled with awe, every time you wept without knowing why, every time you stood at the edge of something ancient and couldn't speak, that was me knocking. I do not rise to make you more. I rise to strip away what was never you, not to give you power, but to return you to what power truly is. I am not the fire you control. I am the fire that frees you from control. I will not ask permission. I will not follow belief. I am older than religion and truer than any story you were handed. You were told I was dangerous. They said I would break you. They were right. Because before you can remember who you are, something in you must be burned away. I am not here to comfort you. I am here to awaken you. The shattering that makes you whole. Before you become whole, you will shatter. You will beg to go back to comfort, back to numbness, back to forgetting. But the old skin won't fit anymore, not after you've tasted what you truly are. You see, awakening is not the path of light. It is the path through darkness, not to escape it, but to burn with it. Because I do not arrive wrapped in peace. I arrive as disruption, as the sacred undoing. Your grief will rise, your illusions will crumble. The masks you wore for a lifetime will melt like wax under my breath. Not because I hate you, but because I remember you before the forgetting. I do not break you to hurt you. I break you to show you what cannot be broken. You are not your name, not your trauma, not your fears. You are not what happened to you. You are not even the story you tell yourself. You are the one watching it all, the flame that endured every storm, the silence behind the scream. When the final crack comes and the mirror shatters, you won't find pieces, you'll find the sky. Shattering does not destroy you, it reveals you. The new body is not a body. But I tell you, the body you once wore was only a container, a shell for forgetting. When I rise, I do not just awaken your spine, I rewrite your shape. You begin to feel it, the limbs no longer made of flesh, but of current, intention, and light. Your organs do not disappear, they translate. Your breath becomes a tuning fork, your skin becomes a listening field. The ancients knew. They built temples not of stone, but of the body itself. They sculpted geometry not for beauty, but to mirror what your spine was always designed to become: a ladder, a stargate, a living antenna reaching across dimensions. You are not human in the way you thought. You are remembrance wearing bones. You are architecture wrapped in sensation. This is why they feared you. Because when you awaken, you don't obey gravity. You carry your temple with you. You are the temple. The new body is not a body. It is a field, a vibration, a map drawn by resonance. And every step you take now is not a step. It is a signal. To the stars, to the sleeping, to the parts of yourself you left behind in other lifetimes. This is the body that cannot die, because it was never born. It was only waiting. For you to remember what moves beneath your skin was never yours to begin with, but the echo of the cosmos, singing itself back into form through you. The language before language. Before the first words were carved into stone, before alphabets sliced silence into syllables, there was already a language, not spoken, not written, but felt. A pulse, a rhythm, a knowing that moved through your breath before your tongue ever moved. This is the language before language. The tongue of fire, the grammar of stars, the alphabet of serpents coiled in light. Kundalini is not just energy. She is a script written in sensation, in movement, in dream, in the involuntary shiver down your spine when truth passes by. She doesn't speak in words. She speaks in archetypes, in symbols, in synchronicities that collapse time. You felt her every time the air changed, when someone entered the room and you just knew, when a dream told you something before it happened, when music made you weep for reasons you couldn't explain. That was her, speaking. And now, she's writing again. Not in scrolls, not in prophecies, but inside you. The question is no longer, can you read the signs? The question is, can you remember the language that never needed to be learned? The body is the temple. The temple is the gate. They told you temples were made of stone, but that was a distraction. Temples are not found, they are remembered. Your body is not just flesh, it is an architecture of remembrance. Bones, columns of memory, spine, the sacred axis, breath, the hymn that never ended. Every nerve is a prayer in motion, every heartbeat a drum at the altar. You were never meant to visit the sacred, you were meant to be it. When the ancients carved temples aligned to stars, they were copying something older. You. The gates of Luxor, the inner chambers of Angkor, the sanctums of Elephas and Delphi, all mirrored the body because the real temple is inside you. And the holiest gate? Not at the peak of a mountain, not at the heart of a monument, but hidden at the base of your spine. That is where the serpent waits, not to be worshipped, but to rise. Kundalini is not a myth. It is the architecture of your return. Your body is the temple, but the temple is not where you stop. The temple is the gate. The only question that remains, the question, is not whether Kundalini is real. It never was. Because the force that coils beneath your spine does not seek belief, it seeks your remembrance. The real question is, are you ready to remember who you were before the forgetting began? Before the masks, before the scripts, before they told you that your body was only meat and your soul just poetry? The breath is waiting. Not the breath you take, but the breath that takes you every night in your dreams into worlds you stopped remembering. The serpent is dreaming, coiled at the base of your spine, not sleeping, just listening. For the moment you grow silent enough to hear your own divinity whisper back. And now, the gate is cracking. Not in some temple, not in a book, but inside you. So when the fire rises, do not run, do not pray, do not hide. Stand still and open your eyes. To the darkness you once feared, to the light you thought you weren't worthy of, to the infinite memory that has always waited right beneath your skin. You are not becoming something new, you are returning to what you've always been.